Well, it is 4 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. The agenda, or the Facilities Committee meeting today. I'd like to see if we have any public comments on the list there, Connie?
Do not, sir.
No public comments, so we'll go ahead and get started. Is that good, Matt?
Sounds great.
All right, so first on our agenda today is the City of Belton is here, and they're gonna talk to us about the Shanklin Road and our Loop 121 development plan, and what we're kind of looking at down the road. They're kind of laying the groundwork for some future things down there. I'm excited to hear about it.
We'll invite Sam and his crew on up, and City of Belton and BISD have been great partners for a long time here, and they've been very generous and kind to me coming into the school district, and we started a meeting in the spring talking about the development of this property, and they've been working with, I believe it's Turley and Associates, right? And really studying long-term improvements that need to be made down there. This is in reference to our property that's about 100 acres down off of Shanklin Road on that 121 loop. So I'll turn it over to
Thanks,
them.
Matt. Appreciate it very much, and thanks to the Facilities Committee for having us today. We're really looking forward to presenting this. As after the acquisition of this property, we felt like it was really important to do some analysis of the side and infrastructure. The school district did voluntarily annex this property, and so it is inside the city limits, just at the edge of the city, basically. But we're excited. I had an opportunity to listen to the developer's report on Monday night because we were having our swearing in, as yesterday, and I sent it to all our team basically to let them see it as well. So obviously the growth is really strong, continues really strong, and I know y'all are looking at what comes next in terms of facilities, and so we're looking forward to presenting this to you. Let me just introduce my folks. Bob Van Til is our interim planning director. You know Bob. Angela Points is our public works director. We'll probably have some interaction with her. And Jennifer Ryken is the representative from Troy Associates. She's going to present the report to y'all. And so I think we'll just jump into that. And Jennifer, let's you kick it off. Angela, you want to say anything? Please go first.
I will say, Jennifer's done an excellent job. There was a lot of components to this study, transportation, water and sewer, and a lot of coordination with you folks at the ISD and with TxDOT, because Loop 121 is a TxDOT roadway. We're really excited to show you this, and I think as soon as you guys are ready to pull the trigger on developing the site for a school, this will give us all a really good idea of the public infrastructure that's needed to make that happen. So I will pass it to Jennifer, and we're here if you guys have any questions or concerns, and love your feedback on this. And yeah, we'll just go ahead.
Great.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Ryken with Turley Associates. You can go ahead and change the slide. So, as she said, we met with the ISD. This was a planning tool for the city of Belton. We evaluated infrastructure, utilities, thoroughfare plans, and we worked with City of Belton, BISD, and TxDOT on coordinating for this. So just a little background on the property. As Matt said, it's a little over 100 acres. It's on West Loop 121. It's west of the Expo Center and just south of the Justice Center. So the majority of the study was on thoroughfare planning. It was looking at the roadways that surround the property, starting with West Loop 121, Shanklin Road, Southwest Parkway, and also looking for a location for a possible lighted intersection. So starting with Loop 121, just a few facts about it. There's one travel lane in each direction. It is considered a major arterial. Portions of it have been funded by TxDOT for widening, just not in this area, although TxDOT is acquiring right-of-way in this area. Shanklin Road, this is built more of as a rural road section. It's 20 foot wide. It is considered, however, on the thoroughfare plan, a major collector. And as y'all probably know, there's a very sharp turn on it as it intersects with Loop 121. So we met with TxDOT, and they provided us with this preliminary design schematic. They have not designed it yet. It's more just a layout. It's not funded. Just some facts about it. It will have a raised median, a dedicated left turn lane, and 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, We also discussed, like I said, a intersection for a light, and that would require a warrant study, which is pretty in-depth that we would have to get into for them to consider putting the light up. So in talking with the ISD, we got some statistics on, what could possibly go onto that campus there. Elementary school, it would need 16 acres, about 800 students. We talked about a middle school having a pretty low probability of going in there. High school needing 85 acres, and the possibility of it being developed as an athletic complex. So, looking at Shanklin Road, we discussed different alignments for Shanklin Road, trying to make that a safer intersection. But with not knowing what was gonna go in on the campus, we were trying to minimize the impact to the ISD. So we have located it a little differently, not so sharp of a intersection there or a curve, minimizing the impact and upgrading it to a major collector. However, we still don't feel this is a well-suited area for a traffic light. It being in the curve of Loop 121. So,
Jennifer, can I jump in real quick on this? So when Jennifer talked a little bit about what we talked about, and we've got 108 acres, in our discussions with the city and with Turley and Associates here was to create maximum flexibility for Belton ISD. That we know we have a great property, we also don't know exactly how we want to use it yet, and given the growth that we're seeing in Templeton demographics report, we might have to use it for different purposes. So that was our initial discussion with them. Connie, can you go back one slide real quick? So on this, as you see, you can see where the Belton ISD logo is. That's exactly where the property is, and this intersection that she's talking about is that Y-shaped property at the top left of that. And what we were really talking about before is the challenge that creates with traffic flow on that curve of 121. And so they came back now, and we'll talk a little bit more about next steps. So this is what we were in negotiations and discussions about in the spring is, if we got this big property there, what's the best way for public to actually access 121, and is it gonna be safe and feasible for everybody, depending on what the site is? So we had some negotiations in the spring, and then we moved forward from there.
And actually, the part of Shanklin Road that's on the west side has already been realigned a little bit so that it does not connect to 121 anymore. It goes up to Auction Barn Road. So you used to have two connections right there in that curve.
Now, was that done, Sam, when y'all put in that facility, that nursing, was that kind of part of that plan at that point?
Yes. And so, and we don't recommend anything change with that other than building that part of the road up to local standards all the way to where it would intersect with the major part of Shanklin Road.
So, just a question real quick, so let's just say we decide to do one of the three, elementary, athletic complex, high school, and that, well, I guess that's 4. Is there the possibility of us putting a light on Loop 121?
Yes.
Like when you get, going down towards the expo center, when you're heading east, we could put a light there?
Yes, and that's a little further on in the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But yes, we looked at different locations for that, and we had discussions with TxDOT. This was one of the first locations, and, in talking with TxDOT, they didn't feel that was a suitable location either. Now, there is an opening in the median right there that they are proposing just because it's an existing road connection right there. They can't take it away, but we don't feel that that would be, if you were to have a high school or something in there, we don't want teenagers trying to turn left in there without a light. So we would want to funnel them to another location where there is a light. So, and we've looked at that. That'll be on another slide here, just a minute. So I don't know what happened to this slide, but we looked at the annual daily trips on there on Loop 121. So this is in 2018, right in front of your property. It's almost 6,000 trips per day. And then as you get further to the light, with I-35, it's 6,300. And that was 2 years ago, so that we've seen a lot of growth in the last 2 years in that area.
How far is the expansion coming
down Loop 121.
to Avenue O, just 439 to Avenue O, just south of I-14. This is the first phase. This is the second phase, not funded yet, but preliminarily conceptual design. And the last phase is over to the Hubbard site, which will be from Interstate 82 to 436.
So here's where we suggest to make a lighted intersection, and that would be at Southwest Parkway. Southwest Parkway is built to the north and is already built as a collector, as a minor collector. Parts of it are already funded, so that it will eventually go from there, north to 35. Like, so, Interstate 14, yes. So this is a really good location for a lighted intersection. It's far enough away from the intersection of 35, it's far enough away from the curve, and it lines up with Southwest Parkway to the north. So we also suggest there would have to be a local road connecting Southwest Parkway to the school. So, the next slide. So our recommendations would be realigning and reconstructing Shanklin Road, and then extending Southwest Parkway, and then also construction of a local road connecting Southwest Parkway to BISD. Now, Southwest Parkway, we suggest it being built a little bit bigger than what it is to the north, if it was to support schools traffic. And the way we suggested that was what? Well, let's go to the next slide. So these are just some schematics of the roads, of what the widths would be. We suggested doing walking trails so that the school would have connectivity by hike and bike trails. This one, yep, there we go. So Southwest Parkway, we suggested doing a wider right-of-way, and that way we could build a standard roadway in the middle, so 3 lanes, one lane each direction with a turn lane in the middle. And then in the future, as we see more and more growth, we could expand that within that right-of-way. That would have a 10-foot trail along the western side, and then all the way to the school site. And we call it the BISD local road extension. That would be built at a local 31-foot back-to-back with sidewalks and a trail.
So I just wanna make sure I point this out, and you gotta correct me if I'm wrong, because I've slept since we talked last on this stuff. But if I take a look at the picture that you have up there, the drawing to the right-hand side, the blue line going north-south on here is Southwest Parkway.
Yes, sir.
I'm correct on that, right? And then the blue line that's going left to right, horizontal on there, is the road that you're proposing that would go into our property.
Yes,
And our
sir.
property is kind of where it looks, the wooded line right there on the left.
Mhm.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. I just wanna make sure I pointed that out to everybody, so y'all see that Southwest Parkway isn't adjacent right to our property. We would have to have a road going into our school site there. But it does give us, a good entrance to the school site or whatever site it might end up.
And of course, you can see the vet clinic, so the road would be on the east side of the vet clinic, lining at the loop, and a good clean 90-degree intersection at the loop, with
Right.
potential for light,
Mhm.
avoiding the conflict at the curve, which would really be potentially dangerous.
Now, where is that road, the one going north and south, Southwest Parkway?
Mhm.
I guess I'm trying to get my bearing
East side
on.
of the vet.
See Dr. Dunn's
Dr. Dunn's
office
clinic,
right there?
that's the.
That's the vet clinic on the left.
Alright, so Luke 121's at the top?
Correct.
Yes.
I can walk up here and point this.
I mean, yeah.
No, I can see the vet, I don't fair enough, I should.
So this right here would be Loop 121, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah,
This right here would be Southwest Parkway?
and the expo's to your right, correct?
Yes.
Where's Matt?
Right here,
And then this is the road that they're talking about, this is our property back here.
right?
And this off of Southwest Parkway would require a road in
And
here.
in
to
that,
our
I'm
property.
showing about midway down the property.
Yeah,
Okay,
so main entrance to, let's say it's a high school, whatever we wanna say, for kicks, let's say it's a high school right now. Main entrance to school, what they're proposing would be right here, so that we're avoiding that whole Y mess off of the curve of 121.
okay.
Yeah, and Angela, by the aerial photograph, you kind of pointed out as well.
Yes, so here's the expo center.
Okay,
This is the BISD property right here. There's the vet clinic.
uh-huh,
Southwest Parkway exists right now. Essentially, it would just extend it directly south, and then there'll be a local road right here.
now who owns that right there that we're be
This is all owned essentially by the vet clinic. The city would have to, acquire the right of way for that extension to make this
Okay.
happen.
Does Warren still own that, or did he sell it to Travis and those guys? How does that
I'm
work?
not exactly sure.
Okay.
There might have
And
been-
then that Southwest Parkway, that goes into the Barnes neighborhood,
Yes.
the Freedom
Yes.
neighborhood and all that?
Yes, and I think that was, actually a really cool thing for us too, is with all of these single-family homes, a lot of them, you know, in the 150 to 250 range
Starter
homes,
home range.
starter homes, you're gonna get a lot of kiddos.
Mhm.
And then with the Loop 121 project, TxDOT will be providing hike and bike trails and sidewalks along Loop 121. So it was also very important for us, like Jennifer said, to include trails and sidewalk along Southwest Parkway to provide pedestrian path for your kiddos. To
And
get
then
into school site.
the Three Creeks people would be coming in from Auction Barn Road, or is there another way? Or there's not another connector to,
Go back a couple slides, there's an overall, I don't know if you can see that, go back, go forward one.
Right there.
Okay, so that blue line, no, I'm sorry, the purple line, there we go, you see the BISD logo?
Yes.
Yep, so Southwest Parkway would eventually go down to the south and tie into that road that comes through Three Creeks.
Would be a Shanklin, Three Creek
so
Boulevard
it would
extension.
connect into the Shanklin at one point?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm starting to see that's,
Yes,
That's
it
good.
it opens up a whole corridor in there, funneling everybody through Southwest Parkway to your property.
when you get to the back of Three Creeks neighborhood, they're ready to go somewhere.
They're right there.
That's-
Wow,
And then,
That's that dotted line over on the left-hand
Yep.
side there, yeah.
that's great.
And that, the road is not built yet, but
Yeah.
the city just submitted, I think it was 16 roadway projects to the K-Tempo, Plain Tempo Metropolitan Planning Organization. And these roads were on that list of
Okay.
roads that we potentially could get grant funding for. So all of this is tying very nicely together.
So one other piece I'll point out real quick, but I think this will be an okay time to do it. So we talked about Three Creeks
Mhm.
over on the west side
Mhm.
here in that dotted line. Over to the east side, remember, is Hubbard Branch, not
Yeah,
that far away
across the
too.
highway, yeah.
So our property location is in a good spot here. Now, what we do with that, there's a whole lot of things to talk about.
Right.
But that's why this discussion about roads and infrastructure is so important, because this is talking about the growth areas in the south for us.
Okay.
So, real quick, let's just say, you know, looking at the demographer's report, you know, we're looking at needing an elementary with the next round of bond issuances, if we can get them voted for, that's in 2 years. So, you know, we could possibly have a school on the ground in 3 years. Is the city ready? Would y'all be ready to entertain us having a facility there as soon as 3 years?
Well, that's why we're here.
So that's it, so that's good. Okay, make sure.
We're just gonna do that planning in advance so we can all get on the same page, basically, try to make it happen.
Yeah. I will, and I'll give Sam and the city a lot of credit, because I've seen this not go well in other cities sometimes, in other districts sometimes, when there's not constant communication. So kudos to the city of Belton for being in long-term discussion on this one and jumping right in the spring with us on it.
And I read a lot in the last couple of years about, you know, the opportunity south along 14 and I-35, some of that. So that y'all have already got some of the sewer and the water stuff, it's already in the works.
We
Coming
certainly
through there.
have trunk lines along the interstate plan for water and sewer. Angela's been working on those projects. The water has already been bid and awarded.
Yeah.
Sewer is yet to come. And that sewer line has been designed to accommodate the sewer flow, the southeastern flow of sewer to that trunk line. Now, the lines are not in place yet. You'll see that in just a minute. We'll talk about the sewer getting designed, but the trunk has been sized to accommodate the sewer coming from the school site.
Awesome.
and that kind of leads us into this slide right here. So the other part of this was us looking at the utilities and how do we service this track. So as Sam said, the sewer is not in, this would flow to that basin that is ongoing that they're working on. So what we would need to do is to put a lift station in and pump this up to the north. Now, there is a stub out right there by the vet clinic, there's a manhole that we could pump to. We looked at the demographics of all the different schools, and the flow created is not enough to impact pumping it into a different basin. So those costs are relatively low. It would require a very small pump and lift station to get that there. We've suggested going along that BISD local road and up Southwest Parkway, following that right of way and pumping up there. And then there's an 18-inch water line on the west over there on Shanklin. It's actually within your property, within an easement. So you would need to tap that to service the property. There's also a water line that's stepped out at the vet clinic on the south side of 121. So that would need to be tapped and an 8-inch line brought over to the school. And then an internal loop would be necessary. So a 6-inch line would be fine to support that and give fire protection and give you the water that you need for that school, for the campus. Go to the next one. So that's just reiterating pretty much everything I just said. So here, this is a little bit what Angela was saying, the right-of-way acquisition. So we've gone through and put some numbers to it for you. From BISD, it would be just under 1.5 acres to accommodate that Shanklin Road expansion. For outside of your property is about 3.3 acres that would be needed for the Southwest Parkway and the BISD extension. And then we also suggested getting additional easements outside of that right of way. So that would be about another 1/2 acre from BISD. And on Shanklin Road, it'll be necessary to relocate some of the existing utilities that are there, and this would allow us to do that. So here are the costs for all of these improvements. Shanklin Road, $1.3 million. When I say Shanklin Local Road, that's that little branch that goes off to the west. That's $550,000. Southwest Parkway, $1 million. BISD Local Road, $450,000, and approximately $450,000 for utilities. So, any questions?
Have we approached the people that own the land at all? Do we anticipate any issues with the easements or
No,
acquisition?
that's one thing I wanted to mention right now. There's been no conversation with the Dunham property or anybody. They're only the first to see this. Truly has worked on this
Maybe a few more.
under the fee, and so we need to make that clear. There has been no conversation yet. So the plan is planned right now. It's very early stages. We obviously need to have those conversations. It's always kind of tricky about timing and when we make the presentation and discussion, but sooner is better than later. We feel like we needed to get this before y'all, and certainly with the demonstration report, it's certain time. But we need some feedback, and we certainly would like to begin those conversations with the other property owners in the area. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but we recognize this is an important partnership with the school district. And any questions of Jennifer before we let go?
Good job, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
And if I could just have you maybe pass these out. This is a copy of the drawing that you have here that Angela was purchasing. Again, this is just to give you a flavor of the scale of the development going on in the vicinity of the property. And in the range of 1,600 dwelling units that have been platted, planned, zoning in the immediate area. You can see the school side at the southwest portion of the property, basically. And so there is a lot of activity in this vicinity, primarily residential, other than the Justice Center that's there and the vet clinic and all. So a lot of activity, and we expect there's a lot of construction going on right now in those areas, houses being built. And so the demand is not going away. It's not minimized at all. Certainly the articles report showed that. So the challenge, obviously, you asked the question about how to make this all happen. It's a little under $4 million basically to get all the infrastructure in place to make the site functional. And we come to the school district as partners, and certainly need to find some way to fund those improvements. And we want y'all to be thinking about that as you do your planning for infrastructure, for the future, and the decisions you make about which site to develop and prepare for the kids moving forward. There's certainly a number of options for how to do that, and I know you all have financial people like we do, and can have those discussions. Certainly one possibility would be inclusion of those funds in a bond issue that y'all prepare and submit as you decide what to include in the area. Matt and I have had some other discussions about another possible mechanism to fund some or all of these improvements, and that would be a tax increment reinvestment zone, funding mechanism basically that we're evaluating now for what to do next. We have a TERS, we have a tax increment district right now in the city. It's coming to the end of its life. It's a 20-year term, and it will expire in 2024. And so these areas here are the boundaries of that. It essentially is the north retail area, Walmart, H-E-B, and all, Heritage Park, the downtown area, the south interstate area, the corridor, the areas in yellow, in orange. And then here's your side right here. You're not in the TERS right now. You're in the city, but you're not in the TERS right now. What the TERS is designed to do is to set a value at undeveloped value. This was done almost 20 years ago now. And so the values for that property were very, very low at the time. And over time, the incremental increase in value goes into a separate pot of money, basically, and is available for public improvements. And so a lot of the things we've been able to do in terms of infrastructure, streets, utilities, park improvements, other things, have been able to be funded through the TERS. The TERS right now is composed of two entities, the city and the county. And the city and the county are in those areas for the full 100% of the increased value goes into that separate pot for public improvements. And we have a TERS board that determines the budget for those expenditures, basically. And so anyway, the TERS is coming to an end in just 4 years, basically. We have to make a determination about what to do next. And so one of the considerations is the possibility of an adjusted boundary in the TERS that might include future developing areas, say along the south interstate, where we're putting infrastructure in, might include these areas around the Shanklin property that very low value right now, but the values are going to increase over time as development occurs. That's the concept of it, and it's worked very, very well in terms of what we've been able to do in the last almost 20 years now. The consideration for the board is one that school districts are not allowed to participate in TERS without legislative action. And so in other areas that have brought a school district in, it does take legislative action. And Matt and I have had this discussion. We've talked to Hugh Shine a little bit, and it's a policy decision, basically, for the board. You have to kind of figure out how we might go about the process of aggregating enough funds to do this project. The city does not have $4 million sitting aside, as you might imagine, to do this. But as early as we could, we want to identify the cost of what it would take to serve the site. And it's a great site. It has all kinds of potential. And you have other locations in the district that the school was the magnet for what came after. And those sites, West Temple, you know what's happened there. And so we know what's going to happen. The value is going to increase, and that will generate funds to do public improvement projects. So I just throw it out there. I know that's a lot to kind of absorb all at one time, but wanted you to begin thinking about that in terms of those are just two options that we thought of so far. And certainly there could be some city participation as well as we have to go out and secure right away and other things. But we wanted to present that to the board and let y'all give that some thought and, give us your consideration, because it, again, it would take some, action at the legislature, and if, the city and county and school district were partners in that, it honestly would go much easier at the legislature. And, again, we've mentioned it to you, but obviously it's only with supporting board that we would be able to go forward with that. So I'll stop there and ask any questions and, see what goes from here.
All right.
Yeah, going back to that, because it does involve, we're right here next to the Expo Center, which is obviously county. What would be the county's input in this? Have you spoken to them about this?
We've had meetings with the county. Of course, the current TERS board is made up of
The city and the
three
county?
city personnel, 3 city people and 2 county people. So
Okay.
county judge and Russell are on it right now,
Mhm.
and then 3 city folks. And of course, if we were to expand it to include the school district would have representation on the board as well. Obviously, non-taxable property doesn't contribute anything, but it's other property and how we draw the boundary that includes that. And we're looking at that right now, looking at what drives the TERS is the anticipated public projects
Mhm.
and the cost of those in relation to the value of the property that you're including. And there are some limits in the legislative action about how much land you can have in a TERS, basically. So that's what we're going through right now as we're looking at an amendment to the TERS boundary and what should be included, whether to retain all the areas up north or whether to perhaps come down and reduce the boundary north but go south, again with a very low property value that would be increasing over the remainder of the life of the TERS.
So a couple things for the board to consider is, first of all, Connie, can you go back to the actual site in the proposals, a map of it? Let's go to that one right there. Let's stick to this utility one, because we can kind of see the whole thing. I think feedback for, City of Belton and Turley and Associates here on if there's any concerns that we all have regarding what's drawn in front of us right now would be a good step one. Or based on the presentations that you've heard tonight, is there anything that really stands out to you that strikes you as, no way in the world we'd ever want to do that, because this is the good feedback portion for them right now.
I did have a question. You know, when I talk to people in the community about the possibility of going south, and we've got this 109 acres there, people question about the justice facility being there, and when they let the folks go, and it's, time for them to be let go, how much traffic do those folks, how many of those folks do you see loitering around in the area? People mention that sometimes, I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. Again, I've asked the police chief that question, I know that's come up before, and we really are not aware of any particular issues that raises, in terms of having a justice center there and the release. There might be an occasional, issue, but none that is so dramatic that I would believe would influence in a negative way, site selection here, on the other side of the loop. And, again, the loop's about to be, will eventually be widened, and this is such a separate, location and facility from that location.
So it's not-
Just haven't really heard anything.
Yeah.
So
that would drive
we drive that way, because that's our road, I live about right there. And, we see folks, of course, walking home who don't have rides from time to time, but there's nowhere for them to hang out. Like, that facility and where it's located, there is no place for somebody to just hang around. You gotta keep moving. So,
At some point, did y'all grant a commercial zoning here on kind of by Southwest Parkway to Colette and them at some point in Barnes? Did they have a commercial there, or maybe a shopping?
Office or?
Yes, I believe it's retail.
So more than likely a filling station or convenience store or something like that's gonna probably, when they hear something's going on, it's
We
gonna
can
happen.
certainly
So,
share that with y'all, let you see what the surrounding
yeah,
zoning is.
I remember reading about that at some point, so.
And I think Sam's point too is some of it depends on what Belton ISD does with that site,
Yes,
as to what
absolutely.
comes up
Yeah,
around
your
there.
site plan, exactly how you do it, what the orientation is, how people get in and out as well.
But I think that, conceptually on this, the idea of the roads, the idea of access point off of Southwest Parkway, those are the big things that we wanted to bring to you here to see if there was any feedback from you all on this one. Secondary is, and it's not really secondary, Sam would tell me it's primary, is funding it all, right? Sam's a nice guy, but I don't think he's gonna fund the $3.5 million on that one on his own, so this is why it plays so important for us in talking about facility projects and potential bond planning moving forward too. If we really need this site for, let's use an elementary as an example, because we know based on the model for presentation on Monday night, Chisholm Trail is gonna be going really high in the next few years. If we need this site for an elementary site, and we work through the perceptual issues of having the justice facility nearby, and decide to put a elementary school there, we have a few millions of dollars that we are gonna have to figure out with the city of Belton how to get the improvements ready for that site as well. So timing, super important, funding, important, and then initial reaction to the plan, I think is the main reason.
I think it's great. Personally, I think it's a fantastic location. It's not right on the road by any means, and I think it's ample space to do something really fantastic.
Yeah, you're not crowded, you got a lot of room to work with in terms of laying it out. So,
And as we found out with the Lake Belton High School site, when you start looking at topography,
Yeah.
so it'd be interesting to see maybe a study of where the high school could go, where maybe elementary, kind of how the topography of the land goes to see where we would space things for future growth, future development, future plans. Because we would really had some challenges with that site as far as the drop on that Lake Belton High School site, which I think they did a great job of how they handled it.
I think that's a good point too, and David might be able to help me out a little bit on this one. My past experience was, I think I've told you all, 20 acres for an elementary school, 40 acres for a middle school, 100 acres for a high school is what we shot for. We've been doing about 16 for an elementary school, is that right, David?
Correct.
And then middle school, about 30 or so. And then obviously, I think we were over 100 acres for Lake Belton High School.
How about it? Yeah.
So just gives you an idea of flexibility of use of that space too. When we get a big chunk of land like that sure helps us out long-term in Belton ISD, making sure we can use it the way we need to. Things like district stadiums have been brought up in athletic facilities and stuff too, and those would be, obviously, this would be a large site that could accommodate something like that and would be an interesting location for that, except for the fact that it is all the way on the south end of the school district. And so if you were talking about any kind of district facility, we would have to work through that.
Well, I think it's right in our wheelhouse of what we need to be looking at right now, because we know what's coming, and 2 years is a blink. I've been on the school board for 4 years. It seemed like just yesterday, the last bond got passed, and now we've got 2 schools sitting there. I mean, it goes by really fast.
Sam, do we need approval of this plan by our whole board for you all to move forward?
it would sure help.
Okay.
Sure help. I think we need to do some work with some of the property owners probably to kind of get the word out to them so that they don't, hear it on the backside. But, yes, I think that would be very timely. And our group, our city council as well, we've got some new people
Yep.
and new, folks in that area as well. And again, y'all are the first to see the whole thing. And so, our city council, Terry board as well, are all aware this is going on. Council's aware of this going on, and we just need to, follow up with them as well. But yes, I think that some timely response by the board would be very helpful for us to take the next step.
Okay. So without any objection from you three, what we would do is take this for a whole board discussion at the next regular scheduled board meeting and move forward with approval of the plan. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for the time.
Yes,
Thank you all, appreciate you, appreciate your partnership.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
Well, obviously, a lot of things to think about, and this is great. This is really helpful to see kind of what the future plans can be, and the teamwork between the city and the school district is always important. So that's awesome. Anything else on that, or we'll keep moving? All right, so our next item is implications of the fall preliminary demographic report.
So what I wanted to make sure we did is, had an opportunity for board to discuss anything that stood out to you on Monday night, and especially on the heels of this presentation that we just had from the city of Belton, to be able to talk just for a couple of minutes. Connie, if you would you, fast forward to a slide where we could see, Hubbard Branch? And I bring this up because I think it's important for us to think not just at Chisholm Trail, but to think, keep going more. Right there. So to think about this as a entire whole on how do we deal with the growth in the south of our school district. So you can see obviously the Three Creeks subdivision and what they've said, we got a lot of people coming in there. We also said, Sam just pointed out that dotted line that we're gonna have, where would it be, down here, this potential roadway that's coming in and all of this. It would allow more access in and out of Three Creeks to all of this too. We also have Hubbard Branch over here, and you see that our site right here for a possible new elementary school is right in the middle of future growth on Three Creeks and in Hubbard Branch. Couple things to consider in all of that. I know that we have an aging facility in Miller Heights Elementary, and Southwest isn't located on this, but we brought this up quite a few times about upgrading facilities in our neighborhoods that are, that have the older facilities. And in Southwest, Leon Heights and Miller Heights are the three that really stand out in those areas. This one, I believe that this, they've said, is finally coming underway. So we're gonna see additional growth out there in Miller Heights area right now in our current zone for Miller Heights. And so I wanted to be able to talk a little bit about next steps, and Ty, you brought it up, the idea of feasibility studies and possibly taking a look at that land that we have at the Loop 121 site and continuing to move forward and look at different options that we might have for that land. Because any of those feasibility studies that we might have to do, looking at the topography, looking at how we could actually use that whole site, might help dictate what we actually need to put on that site eventually. What are your thoughts? Anything that stood out to you in this presentation from Templeton demographics on the south side of our school district here?
Well, first question is Hubbard Branch, is it in Belton city limits?
Yes.
Okay, so, that was my, you go first.
Yeah, this is more of a conceptual question. Looking at what we've got there, knowing the problems that, you've pointed out problems with the site we have for Miller.
Yeah.
Beyond the aging building and all that, there's some other things that have become an issue. And I don't know that there's any land even available over there. And then we've got Southwest, which, we're able to keep up and stuff, but, the idea of trying to build a new school there while you have an existing school, we don't know if that's,
Right.
so I guess conceptually, I guess my first question is, you've been in multi, elementary schools. What is the ideal size of an elementary school as far as population goes?
So most of the time, we did some studies when I was in Leander. Most would say that you don't want to go over 800. 800 is what you would build your school for. And that's based on principal feedback. We did a research study, pulled research, and said, what is it? And a lot of it says, it talks about personalization, particularly at the elementary level, what the ideal size is principals and teachers want to know families and kids. And you get too big, and you lose that. From past experience, we built schools that were, the footprint was for 800 students, but we also built that with a larger property size, so larger than 15 acres, so that we could add portables because it was such a fast growth area. So in comparison, that district was growing about 1,000 to 1,200 students a year at the time. And so the whole idea was you would have your core facility that would serve 800 students, but you would also have some area there to add portables until the next school was built so that you could split the growth again. And so that's one way to think about things for planning for future growth. My recommendation, based on what I see in other school districts, is our footprint shouldn't go over 800 students. It might be few and far between that we need to add portables. I don't like adding portables, but we might need to add a portable or two if, for example, in the north part of our school district right now, it looks like we're growing faster than anticipated a couple of years ago. A portable or two might be warranted until you can address that, but it's not a long-term solution.
How big, and I should know this, I don't, how big are, like, Miller Southwest, what is their population?
Or something at Miller Heights.
I think we're down lower than that. We're in the 300s at both of the schools
Okay.
right now, I believe.
And what is their capacity? And I'm just, I don't know it, but what is their capacity? Were they built when they were smaller campuses
They're
anyway,
not far,
right?
both of them are.
Yeah, I'm not
It's all
sure.
in the report. Yeah, it's on our deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's on the chart.
yeah, and I, like I said, I don't
Connie, can you pull
remember.
that part back
No, it's
up?
fine, I'm just trying to remember, you know, I guess my question is this site, does it give us the ability to fix some problems that we know that we have that are just coming?
Well, I can tell you right now, because I looked at it the other day, that if you took the student populations from Miller and Southwest and moved them to a brand new 800 student facility, you'd have room for another 100 students to come from Chisholm, which this time next year, they're supposed to be 100 over their capacity. So by building a Hubbard or a Loop 121 site, you're really not gaining any seats on the south side of town,
Yeah.
but you're taking some kids.
From older.
And there's something that Bob said the other day that I hadn't thought about, was the price per student at these littler schools
The cost, yeah.
is higher, and I really wanted to start crunching numbers on that too, because I think that goes to the basis of the opportunity equalization that we've talked about with the north and the south. So we're really not, by building one elementary south, we're not gaining any help from a number standpoint. We're just taking some kids away from two campuses where they're gonna get to go to a brand new campus where, and that's very important to me.
Well, it also sets us up to finally be free of these tiny little campuses that are, you know, not necessarily efficient, you know, and spread out and all of that. So, you know, it sets us up to be able to move forward and get another one later on.
Yep.
And
If we ever did do that, what it would do though, Ty, come to think of it, one of the problems we've had with Southwest was the idea of if we wanted to keep a school there, if we were to build a elementary school on that 121 area, consolidate those, we're not adding any, really adding 100 kids basically, but if that bought us time to raise that Southwest location and build another school there, a two-story, because there is land there. And then you could buy, that buys us a lot of time in the south of that.
And I've thought about that, like the Hubbard branch, and before this presentation today, I hadn't really, in my mind, put the elementary on the Shanklin
Yeah.
site, but I was thinking that you could build that school at Hubbard, or now the 121, if we could figure that out, and that would give you time to do exactly what you just
Tear
said.
down the old one.
But, so, something else that's been brought up a lot of times is when you build a new school, it brings in opportunity if there's not growth there yet, or if it's just beginning. But if we plant one in Southwest, obviously that's not gonna happen, because with the current way the lines are drawn that way. But I just like the community aspect of that campus
Right.
for various reasons. So, you know, ultimately, we could do 2 elementaries, put both of them south, but that's gonna require us eliminating the river as a boundary for true feeders with elementaries, moving forward pretty quick,
Potentially, yeah.
to even some of the numbers out.
To even some of the numbers, here's what I would say on that. That would create a cascade effect on attendance boundaries to the north, going over the river. That's a painful item, and Mike might want to weigh in on this in a minute. I think that's a painful item that we want to think about. And I will say this, I'm going to tell you a fast story about Oregon. The district I served in Oregon was 200 square miles, so same size as Belton ISD. We had 22,000 students. We had the smallest elementary school. It was in the middle of apple orchards. It was a beautiful little old elementary school, but it was only 120 kids. We couldn't close that school because politically that small community did not want that school closed.
Right.
And I bring that up just because in these discussions too, I have to rely on you all as the history of Belton and to know what we can do and what we can't do. I know Miller Heights and Southwest have been long-term existing facilities, and there could be some real pain points about moving facilities out of those locations. But your talk about Hubbard Branch, I think that is a legitimate thing to consider. Hubbard Branch is not far from Miller Heights. you could build a 2-story or an 800-student elementary school on the Hubbard Branch property, pull students from Miller Heights out there, and have a whole new building for the new growth and for Miller Heights that solves, two problems with that.
You would just have to pull some kids from
Correct.
the west side of 35 over there to get to that 800. Like you said, right now, Southwest and Miller Heights combined don't even hit that 800.
They're at 700. And
So-
I've walked that Southwest, and during the height of the pandemic, when we were all locked down, I drove campuses all the time. I don't see there being enough room to do the plan of building it and being able to occupy that campus at
No,
the
you
same
have to tear
time.
that thing
There's
down.
not
and
enough
rebuild
room
it.
south on that hill.
I
I
think,
see it.
I think it was my first facilities committee meeting, and I remember some hesitancy and all of that, going, well, we could probably do it, but it wouldn't be great, like, it would be tight, it really would. Do you have anything to add, Mike?
I think probably when you start talking about aging out facilities in Leon Heights probably has to come into that conversation because it is by far the smallest. I mean, capacity wise, it's only 265.
We got what, 174 there now or something?
Yeah.
I know.
And
I've
also,
been
just
told.
always remember too, there are 2 communities of kids that are zoned, that are south of the river and south of the lake that are zoned north for elementary and then come back for middle school. So you have a group of about 250 or more elementary students from, basically from the corner of 31st Street and Taylor's Valley Church there, that all the way, those kids all go to Chisholm Trail or Charter Oak and then come back to BMS, and then you have the Hook kids
Right.
there off of to the north side of 439. That's about 120 students that go to Lakewood and then come back to BMS.
So that would, we would gain 250
There's,
north.
if you want, yeah, there's some kid, they're already north. If you did go bigger in the south, there are some natural boundaries that kids
that we
would
could
need to
pull.
come south anyways, so. And then there's the Leon Heights question as well, so there's some movement, there's some wiggle room in there whenever you start talking about putting all the pieces together. It may not shift kids from the north side that have to come south for elementary.
Now, this might add a layer of complexity, but I think it's worthwhile just filing in the back of your mind too. So fast forward to what we did with Grover Elementary School, we ended up increasing options and made that a K-8 school because the community valued it so much. We had a facility there that they wanted to keep, and we needed to fill the building. So we created a K-8 option for people to say, if they really want to keep their kids in that small community, they could keep their kids in there, and we could better use our facility for the future. It's not the model that we had at the time. It broke the model of our elementary school and middle school, but it utilized our facilities well and met our community need. And so I bring that up just because as we talk about this idea of journey of a graduate and what we want for kids for the future, we might also talk about different options that might be available to us for something like Leon Heights facility in the future.
And I've thought too about the repurposing of either Miller or Leon Heights,
Right.
DAEP,
When we talk about Leon Heights moving Bex or something over there.
Well, the Head Start could go there.
Head Start,
That
that's
gives
right.
Bex more
And
room.
that takes care of Bex's problem.
DAEP needs a place to go, they don't have enough room, they don't have a good facility, so there's some options there too.
And I know Connie sent us the list of all the properties that we have, but we don't have, do we have anything that's big enough in the center of Belton, like Leon Heights, or is that it?
That's it. Now, we have the other
Second.
property next to the Ag Barn.
Second Street.
Second Street is right next to the Ag Barn there.
Which is still south, really.
Yeah.
It's an interesting location, and I went and walked that one with Robin, and there, she had some concerns about, I think she called it the ravine back there.
Yeah.
In it, there's also an interesting discussion on that one too about, do we need Ag Barn expansion for use for Lake Belton High School and Belton High School, and then, does that eat into that property?
So that was one of the last meetings when Robin was here, and you came along for that meeting when
I
we
did.
walked that property.
Yeah.
And we're already turning kids away from our ag department, and they went down, Dave and them, and did a study on the buildings that they'd asked for, the poultry, and then another hog barn, is that what it was?
Yeah.
And it's a little over $1 million, but that would make that facility really nice for those kids for a while.
Yeah.
And I just hate, like Swim said, I hate when we're turning kids away, when we don't have capacity for kids to be involved in something. Just involvement means so much more success in life.
So do we no longer own the Wilson Kersey field and then the part that was next to that? And Do we own any of that anymore?
I believe we do. Connie might be able to help me on this one. Isn't there's a little spot of land that we own right next to Wilson Kersey? Does that sound right,
It just seems
David?
like in the past we had more and like.
Where the old walking track is?
Maybe yes.
I think we sold it.
Yeah, we
Indigo
sold
we
it.
did?
Yeah,
Cause
Is
I
that
used to
Indigo?
think that would be a great school
yeah, we
site,
don't own that anymore.
right there on Sixth Street.
Yeah.
Seemed like a
It
great
ain't worth anything
location.
anybody but us.
Doesn't sound like we own that anymore, and I had it in my head, we did. So.
That was old Bart's field that was the junior high whenever, one of our two fields, and we sold that years ago to Indigo, right?
Indigo, yeah,
Before the
Indigo.
fire, and then the fire happened.
But now they've moved out, I wonder if they just.
Well, their offices are still there.
Yeah, wonder if they'll give it back.
We'll take
I
we'll
just
take
think it
those.
would
They
be
still office
Because
there.
it's central and it was big and it was the ISD property and I always felt like it could be a school to me.
But a football field's only an acre. That's not a very big property. What is that, 3 acres?
Oh, it's
5?
big.
Really?
Well, it goes all the way down.
Well, if you
Third.
consider the Indigo part of it now, where the old building used to
And
be.
where the,
Yeah.
and where.
It's more
our
square footage
special
than you
ed
think.
building's gonna
Yeah.
be.
How much you think is that?
I can't remember, Sam, I sent that to you or Mike one time,
Huh, that'd be interesting.
the size of that.
A lot of problems we get.
Mine
It's on that piece
It's
of
2 to
land.
3 acres.
2 or 3.
I said it.
Oh, that is-
That's
that's
not
not-
it.
that does seem
We're
good.
not building schools.
No, I mean, you couldn't build a school.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Okay.
You could build a swim center though.
I'll talk real quickly on this one, on north part of our school district. Y'all know I talked to you briefly about ideas moving forward there. We're gonna continue to pursue ideas moving forward there, and I'll update y'all as appropriate on those. But challenge that we have in front of us is growth on north, growth on south, and what we have regarding needs and wants for the future. Bond has come up quite a few times, and just to file away in your memory as well, I think if we were looking at August of 2022, according to our last report by our financial advisor, we would have about $130 million bond capacity, give or take, so.
And what is our elementary schools, 25 million, right?
Right.
Give or take.
Give or take.
Right.
I bring this up though, because if we are potentially looking for a bond in the next few years, 2022, 2023, whatever it may be, we do have some capacity to think about building multiple elementary schools based on our financial outlook. It was in May of 2020 when we got that report. I also want to bring that up because the next part that we're going to jump into here is potential facility projects for winter and spring, and I'm going to let our team talk through some stuff. But I don't want to bring us back to the idea of costs for potential elementary school design and things too. A strategy in this might be that we use leftover bond funds to help design a new elementary footprint for our future schools. We'd have to work with our bond council to make sure that that's appropriate. I think that would be appropriate use of our funds. And then we would be able to design that new footprint that the board would like for our elementary schools to look like, which is a big chunk of money. It costs a lot to design a school. You use that money to do so, and then you go out for another bond with a footprint already designed so you can show the public, hey, at this site at Hubbard Branch, this is what the school will look like based on our designs and stuff. So I'm gonna have them come and talk to you a little bit about a list of projects, but then I'm also gonna bring us back to growth and planning for the future as well. Does that work?
And 2 more things real quick,
Sure.
and then we'll go on. Is the North Gate, is that the only elementary / property that we own north at this point? There's one other? That's it?
That's all we have in the north.
So do we have scouts out looking? Or is that in the plan, maybe to try to find another 20 acres-ish somewhere
We
in
are,
the north?
always gonna look for additional land, and we're in the middle of working on our process for Belton ISD moving forward.
Okay, thank you for that.
We can come back to it.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the potential facility projects for winter and spring.
And I'll kind of guide this discussion, but there may be questions and input from various members of the team.
I know what the question was, and it had to do with Mike. That's why it triggered.
I got a lot of questions about Mike. Just,
So, looking ahead at the middle school, we're talking about elementary growth, because we know we're already in hot water with elementary in certain spots. The middle school growth, we're in pretty good shape until what, 26, 27?
And
that's
even
just
then,
for
that's
one.
just in one campus,
One
so we could shift some things
So I was
around.
gonna say, that would be
sooner
the
than
time
later.
when a shift could happen to even some of those out in just the middle school area. So we have some help there, that could maybe get us closer to 30.
Oh, I definitely think so. I feel good about where we are in our secondary schools.
Okay.
I really do. Our elementary schools is where I
And that's what it's like, I don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
2030.
Dude, you got a thing, man?
I'm just excited we all will be on the board in 2030. You're still gonna have me here.
Oh, boy.
So as we worked through this discussion tonight, kind of to put a bow back on and kind of finalize the talk we had back in September, we brought up I'm about to pull this so I can see it. So we went back through the old capital improvement project list that we've been working through since about 2014 or 15. With, when Connor Robertson came on board, we kind of had this capital improvement list. It had 10 or 12 items on it, and annually we would revisit that and as things would come off. And so working with you guys, we had kind of narrowed that list down in September. I think actually we had talked about it previously in the summer in like June or July, and then we came back and revisited it one more time in September. And we feel like to that list, along with what we're discussing with you guys tonight, kind of brings that list to a pretty good close. And so we had a few items that we tabled. We had the district-wide playground improvements, which we walked those today. Other than some cleanup and some topsoil and some hydromulch and some seeding, we're pretty much done with that project. So it's going to be really, really incredible. We have quite a few needs that were addressed in our CTE. And so we had all of the CTE projects that were on that list in September totaled a little over $3 million. We feel like plus the agriculture proposal that was brought to y'all back in the fall as well, back in the summer. We do feel like the facilities assessment is going to give us a really clear picture of not only the needs from a condition standpoint, but there's also going to be an adequacy component to that facilities assessment where it tells us how adequate is one facility compared to the others. So, we would ask the facilities portion for our CTE. We know there's needs. We have some money set aside for some short-term safety considerations, emergency type stuff. We do know that by spring break, we're gonna have a pretty clear picture of a conditions assessment and an adequacy assessment of those CTE facilities. And as we go through long-term strategic planning, that facilities assessment, we're hoping will guide those needs, whether it is remodels, whether it's completely new facilities, whether it's, depending on how that comes out. And we know we have needs. We know that we're gonna have some adequacy issues. And we kind of want that process to guide that work. The other things that were on here was we had tabled the administration building. We felt like what we needed to get done is done. Safety vestibules on both ends. We don't see a lot of other needs, so everything else has been tabled off of that list. We canceled the feasibility of baseball, softball, turf for various reasons, not to come back into that discussion. So really the two things that were remaining was to a roof replacement system at the Roy and G. Potts Swim Center, and the discussion about BHS tennis courts 9 and 10. That's consistently been on the list since 2014, 15, and we're going to bring it up again tonight for discussion with you guys. So we wanted to kind of break these down into possible funding sources, and then have a little bit more in-depth discussion about the facilities improvement project and the funds that are still available from that. So the first thing is we still have this rough number of $6 million, a little over $6.5 million that we anticipate is going to be remaining on bond funds from the 2017 bond. Obviously, we know that number could change depending on when the final project numbers come in, just like we saw with the presentation Monday night, just on some of the interest savings and some of those types of things. But we Jennifer feels pretty confident this is going to be in the ballpark. We are going to bring a RFP to you in the December board meeting to replace that outer membrane, basically a roof replacement at the swim center. As you know, and has been reported to you, that outer membrane has failed. It was a 15-year product. That facility's 15 years old, and it's starting to, the UV has broken down the seams, and I think we have 6 or 7 rips on that, south side of the building right now, and when we get substantial rain, that rain is coming in between the two membranes and is filling onto the lower membrane. And the big fear with that, obviously would be as we discussed earlier, your mold and things like that. And also if that inner membrane ever failed, we would have a serious issue on our hands. So, that's something that as Jennifer has discussed this with our bond council, that is something we definitely could spend bond funds on that repair. And the replacement of the outer membrane is about $176,000. We had to do get an architect assessment so we could do the RFP, and then they want to put a contingency in to replace insulation that's has water damage to it. That's about $10,000. So we will bring that to you guys in December to ask for approval. And then we felt like a discussion about the BHS tennis court expansion 9 and 10 to get to where that one's, I don't know that we're gonna need an adequacy assessment to tell us we have 10 at one high school and 8 at the other. So that's something that we thought that we could probably talk about
We
tonight.
figured that math out pretty well.
And you know, Mike, I mean, from the very first time I sat in a board meeting, when I was running for the board, they've been talking about doing something with tennis forever, and we still haven't pulled the trigger on it. Now, are we gonna put a couple of those canopies that you talked about?
We are.
And we can integrate that in and help us with this expansion. Now, the 510 doesn't take into consideration a concession stand, bathrooms, it's just a court.
That'd be for
Just the
tennis courts, surfacing, fencing, and lights is what that would cover.
So could we engineer, or could we design that facility-wise to where maybe later down the road, we would have a spot to put bathroom, concession, storage, those type of things down the road? But we could go ahead and get those courts going with those canopies, and that would make that facility where BHS could have big-time tournaments, where they really can't with 8.
That's correct. And I think, I'll tie this into potential future bond projects and stuff too. What we have to do long-term with that natatorium is involved in that discussion with concession stands and location and stuff all in that area, right? The whole Belton High School athletic complex, if we have to do something different for a natatorium in the future, might need to be kind of remodeled in that area. So I would consider, why we're bringing these two courts to you now is there is an equity issue that we think we could address, and we do have the funds to address in this right now. We wouldn't go forward with the concession stands and things like that until we know a little more clearly what the long-term layout of that facility might really look like.
And so, moving to the facilities improvement funds, this is back to the $3.5 million that was allocated last fall to do projects across the district. Up to this point, we have 43 projects remaining that we anticipate will be finished, completed by the summer of 2021. And in that is a substantial amount of that remaining is allocated for CTE, for immediate needs at CTE at Belton High School. We know there's long-term needs. We know there's some immediate needs as well. So there's still some money in that. Out of that 43 projects, there's money allocated for CTE at Belton High School to try to make sure that we address the needs that come up this year in anticipation of a long-term strategic plan. Of that $3.5 million, we have encumbered, or we have set aside the remaining projects. It's about $755,000. And we still feel like even with those 43 projects and that $755,000, we're still right on our 846,227, which is remaining of that original allotment of money. Just to remember, we wanted to open a discussion tonight to remind y'all that money came from fund balance. We do have 43 outstanding items, and just talk a little bit about, there are some things that when we talk about remaining money from bonds, there's certain ways that money has to be spent. When we talk about money that was taken from fund balance and designated for a specific project, we have a lot more flexibility with how that money can be spent in the future, the money that's left over. So that's, we're still right on target with our 846, but we did want to talk about, there are some things that we think we could fund from bond, and then there's some things where we may want to look at. That 846 could go a lot of different ways depending on needs in the district over the next year or so.
So, Mike brings that up simply because we have a legislative session coming up and we have zero idea what the budget's really gonna look like after this legislative session. And so it's just important to remember that 846 can go back into fund balance
Right.
and can be used for a lot of other things other than facilities. That 5 million or so, 6.5 million that we have in bond funds, that's more of what we would have to talk about for facilities. Now, whatever the board desires, we can do moving forward. I just wanna make sure that we're thinking about budget as a whole and not budget just facilities with that 850,000. Because one of the last things I ever wanna do is if we get in a budget crisis, that we're laying people off. $850,000 saves a lot of positions for a year or two, right? And so I just bring that up because I think we gotta be kinda careful on how we spend that $850,000. We have a little more latitude, I think, with regarding facility improvements with that bond pot of money. But, I would encourage us to think through, and that $850,000, possibly keeping that, putting that right back in fund balance for a little bit of time until we see what the state might actually do with our budget moving forward.
Now, thinking about that, aren't we kind of over from a dollar standpoint or percentage standpoint where districts kind of need to be with the fund balance? Aren't we've already padded that already, right?
And we brought it down pretty, I mean, we were really high.
Yeah.
And we brought it down to get it to within more of the best practices. But I think what Matt is saying is, if the new legislature comes in and cuts our budget 30%, then we could take that 846, put it back in there, and we'd be whole for a while.
That's right. Well, and the other thing is, I do think we're still over our local policy, but it's gonna be up to the board on how we use that fund balance. If you use it as a rainy day fund in the middle of a pandemic, that makes a whole lot of sense to me, but I'm also not the board that makes the budget decision, right? I know that there's been a lot of effort to increase the fund balance so we can do good things for our kids in the school district, and I wanna honor that. I will say this too, I think we're gonna need to talk in the spring here about how we might need to assign some of that fund balance to facility use. There's a strong push from representatives in talk right now before the legislative session opens to examine fund balances in school districts to help balance budget coming up.
Okay.
Heard it this morning, heard it a few weeks ago from Representative Huberty, and it was said point blank, hey y'all, everybody's gonna have to chip in to help figure this pandemic budget crisis out.
So at that point,
So,
where they spend, what they take.
there's strategies around all of that to say, we're gonna assign some fund balance to facility improvement projects, and here's how we're gonna use that. So we have a lot to talk about budget-wise this spring, and that's why my hesitancy about that $850,000, I'm just hesitant on that because I want people to keep their jobs, and I wanna keep doing great things for kids. And, I think we might need to pinch every penny when we're doing that.
And there, I mean, there's some outlandish things. I mean, we think about if the budget got cut and we needed it for FTEs, for salary. Also, the way we're continuing to grow, you could get in a situation where you might need to buy a couple buses or some vehicles at that time of money as well. So, I mean, there's some things going on. I will say this thing, as we looked at the review, the list, the capital list, and kind of where we have area items that had been on that list, we kind of have addressed now. And we talked about the CTE. We fully anticipate the same thing with our fine arts programs. We're gonna find some things out of that conditions and adequate assistance. We know we have some small projects in fine arts. We know we have some big projects too. And we expect, as we finish that facilities assessment, we're gonna have some pretty good pictures of where our gaps are and the things we need to do within our fine arts department to get it up to where all in our middle schools that may have been initially designed as intermediate schools, and in our older high school and our newer high school, we know we're gonna see some issues there and some things that we're probably gonna have to consider in our long-term strategic planning as well. So that's CTE and fine arts definitely are gonna need to be addressed, and we think we're gonna have some really good data here in about 3.5 months that will help us through that.
So with the exception of these two right here, to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, these two items up here, which all, the swim center, which is the roof, which has to be done, obviously, and then the tennis court, which is, been kicked down the road for as long as I can remember. We can pull that out of bond funds, we know that, but then it seems like after that, we're kind of at a standstill until we get the facilities report in to determine, because we've got some money left over in bond funds, but if that facilities report comes back and says, oh, by the way, you got 1.3 million you're about to spend no matter what, So we're kind of in a hole after these two, right? This kind of ends our run until we get that report.
I don't wanna make Ty cry, so I don't think it ends our run, I wanna be clear about that.
We're
No.
adjourned until May. Put me in charge of a committee that isn't a committee anymore.
But I do think that we have to be thoughtful about a couple of these things. Now, Mike has another list of
Yeah.
projects that we need to talk about real quickly here, and there are a couple that pertain to this spring as well that I think this committee needs to know about.
Well, just remember too, on this one, Ty, there's still $750,000 worth of jobs on this one that are gonna be done over the next 9 months.
Yeah, you're sure getting to do.
We already approved all those. We're moving on, right, David?
And so we have some other considerations and some things, obviously funding streams will still be determined, and we'll rely on you guys for some of this, we'll rely on Jennifer Land and her team for some of this, but the facilities assessment, we have approved the facilities assessment, we're already working with the various firms that are doing this for us, but we haven't come back to you guys and talked about kind of the scope of this and what it's gonna cost, because I think there is some sticker price shock value on this, and so, we did an RFP, we had 13 companies that submitted, and we chose, made our decision based on the quality of what product we're gonna get, and what we thought would best help our district plan, not only for the immediate, but for the long term too. We expect to be able to build 10, 15, and 20-year plans off of this facilities assessment. So, you can see there, after we negotiated and worked through it, the cost that we're gonna end up with is, for our facilities assessment, is $384,000. And so, which is at a high sticker price, but it's also, you have 2 architectural firms, a project manager, and an engineering firm putting in about 5 months of work on it. So, I mean, we're gonna get a pretty detailed product that's gonna have a dashboard, interactive, we're gonna have a product that you sit on a table and we can look at and discuss things we can put, I mean, we're gonna have, the way David and I were talking about it today is, when you get to a point where every classroom has an educational adequacy index, every air conditioning unit in the district is aged, parted out, and we should have a replacement value on when the capacitor's gonna go out on it. I mean, we're gonna have some pretty detailed data that should help us plan and should help us save money in the long run by not doing things that we don't need to do until we need to do them, and it'll also help us budget because we can schedule out routine maintenance costs over time instead of waiting until things break down to replace them. So, just to bring that out in full disclosure, it is an expensive project, but we do think it's gonna save us a lot of money in the long run.
And I'll add real quick, and why it's listed under funding stream to be determined is we're getting advice on that one about whether or not we can use bond funds to pay for it, or whether that would have to come out of those facility improvement funds. So, while it's either one of those, it's gonna have to come out of one of them, but our hope would be that we can use it out of bond funds. Yeah.
We do have an issue at Belton High, and this is not really an upgrade, it's kind of to address something that's gotten worse over time, is if you've been to a softball game or a tennis match after a rain, you probably notice that there's lots of standing water around that area. We have some drainage issues, and at one time, that whole area drained through the softball indoor batting cages, and so a couple of years ago, we addressed that by building kind of a concrete barrier that kind of diverted that. But what's happened now is it goes around the top and comes down through, and it's starting to erode that area in between the tennis court sidewalk, the softball area, and between the softball area and the fence, the left field fence. There's a lot of standing water, a lot of erosion. And so as we looked at it and we looked at different options, the best option is just go ahead and treat that like it was a new facility. And I hope I'm explaining this correctly. But treat that like it's a brand new facility, put in drainage, put in storm drains, come in and put concrete that whole area, and just don't have it like it is. I mean, have it where when it rains, the water goes to a drain and the water gets hauled off, and we don't have a lot of standing water around those two facilities anymore.
So where would it go? I mean, because the houses back in the Camino Principal are just right there.
It's just gonna sort of daylight out into that practice area. The
baseball
problem,
practice
the
field right there.
problem with that area, I mean, there are no storm structures out there. Before any of our time, they found the lowest site on that campus and said, let's build a softball field here. And they did, so it just collects. So we can run it all faster with concrete. But you're right, it's got a pond in another location, but it shouldn't affect students or visitors or anything like that.
So there's like that area where the JV baseball practices, kind of out into that area is kind of where it'll go.
And you know, we've always had drainage issues there where those alternate, long and triple jump pits are. And in that area behind the sidewalks to the visitors bleachers, there's an area that collects water there as well.
And this would help with that too?
Yeah, we would rather it collect in those areas than up there where it's eroding sidewalks, where those bleachers areas are, we're getting some erosion there. And then if you noticed in the softball, we put a concrete mound area in the bullpen because it would constantly have standing water in it as well, where at least then the kids get to get a pin workout in or warm up during the game and not be in the mud back there. It's needed. It's a high price tag, but those are gonna be facilities we're gonna use for a long time, and we're just not getting any kind of drainage in that low spot right now.
I'll just have to say that I've been around a lot of tennis facilities in the area, smaller schools, Robinson, different places, and our Belton High School tennis facility is substandard. It needs help in many areas.
This will dress the facility up a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yep. But from a usage standpoint, when they're having a match, there's nowhere for the kids to go, so they put all their stuff on those bleachers, there's water underneath there, their parents are sitting there, it's a mess, so I think that's a great idea.
The final one on here is the Lake Belton High School, bleacher expansion, in a 3-year planning process where we got a lot of things right. One thing that, as we look at it now and where the facility's open and we have kids there and we see the type of turnout we're getting for events is, we think of, a 400 seat baseball facility, baseball bleachers and 250 seats, softball. 253 softball seat facility probably is not gonna be adequate for a school that's gonna have 1,900 students in 2 years.
And I think we ought to add in there, we have some COVID implications in this as well. And so in the springtime of this year, if we have a current plan that goes forward, and we're still under restrictions for attendance and things, we have 50% capacity in attendance at those games. So you do have an equity issue. I know it might be hard to believe, but we do have an equity issue there when we have programs that are running, and we have to potentially keep parents from attending their kids' games because our stands are half the size they are at Belton High School. So we bring that to you, knowing that we probably should have, and shoulda, woulda, coulda, right? Should have addressed those facilities and the equal stands when we built the facility. But we do know that based on where we are in the spring, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but we're concerned that we might actually have to turn parents away from attending their kids' baseball and softball games because our bleachers are so small.
Well, part of the problem with that, in my opinion too, is that the beauty of the design of that facility, you have these great bullpens down both foul lines. So that's not an area where people can bring, we can't say, well, we'll just address it this year with let people pull up their lawn chairs and sit along the fence. You can't sit along the fence. There's these bullpens that run almost the length of the foul line on both sides. And we also have the brick walls that are, I don't know,
They're pretty high.
3 feet high too, that kind of limits, the amount of just lawn chair traffic you could allow and stuff like that. So
And I finished thinking about this, I knew this was coming. And I'll never forget the first Sunday, they were putting the turf in, and me and the family went up, and we walked that facility so many times on Sundays just to find something to do. And the first time I walked out on both of those fields, I saw it.
The bleachers.
Yes, and I went, wow, how did this get missed? And then my wife said, well, where are the armchairs gonna sit? She noticed that, because that's usually where we sit. She said, where are the people in lawn chairs gonna sit? And I went, wow, this is not gonna be good. So I've been knowing this was coming.
You should have done a better job designing that.
Yeah. So, how soon, well, how soon could you?
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
Also, that facility was built to be shared for Belton High School in the event we had bad weather. So you
Yep.
guys think about a 6A school and their kids having to go over
Right.
there to play it. That's why we turfed it and
Yep.
left Belton High
Exactly
School.
how we turfed
Absolutely,
it.
it's just, the seating's just not, it's just not anywhere close. So we're just gonna try to go up to what capacity are you gonna try to go up to?
So,
The baseball field?
Yeah.
so I met with Sturdy Steel just when I saw the bleachers, just, so I had a ballpark of numbers. It would basically estimate they can make baseball 800 and softball 523 by they don't have to have both ramps because ADA compliant, you don't really need both ramps because the length of the stands is not conducive to require you to have two handicap ramps, and they just extend on both sides, so you double the capacity of it.
So eight what?
You'd be at 800 baseball and 523 for softball, which Belton High School baseball is 892, so it'd be right there, and then Belton High School softball's 480, so.
Yeah, that's basically the same.
Right about
Yeah.
the same.
I know that, like there would be games, some of the higher, midway, some of those games, things got really crowded, but that seemed to be a good number at Belton High School through the years. We always seem to kind of make, but we also had places for people to stand on the sides
Yeah.
too. There'd be 50 or more between the two sides
Yeah.
standing
The
around.
bullpens are flipped there. The bullpens
Yeah.
are all the way back at
Yeah.
the outfield coming in. These bullpens are right behind the dugout going out, so it creates.
Is there the ability to make that a little bit more than those two, bless you, than that?
That's really after meeting with Sturdy Steel, that would max out, so it would transition to where the stands would now encompass the whole backstop area, and you're pretty much maxed out on space at that point because of the bricks.
Can you still keep going up to gain a little bit?
I guess
You're gonna
you
try to
could-
keep it the same?
my initial conversation was what would be the easiest, just extending it out.
What I'm saying is that once we do fill that thing up, I know, those are gonna be two good programs moving forward. 3 years down the road, are we gonna be having the same conversation? Well, we're maxed out again in our bleachers. Well, we could address it now. I'm just asking.
I think the 800 you're gonna be fine, because even at Belton High School at the 892, that 92, that's that far set of bleachers that no one sits in too.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah,
that's-
yeah.
forget about that, that's where the other teams,
Okay, then.
JV sits and stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much this should figure in the discussion too, but from a community standpoint, we're gonna host a lot of playoff games there if we choose to. I mean, I know in West, last year, they hosted over 60 baseball and softball playoff games. And we're gonna be the only turf facility from Georgetown Eastview to Waco ISD. So there's about a 75 mile stretch there where we're the only turf field.
So the
So
cornfields.
we're gonna
and
get a lot of
less
playoff
softball
games.
games, huh?
Yep.
So, where would that money come from? And is that gonna be something y'all are gonna try to have in place for this spring? So y'all gonna get rolling on this?
We'd like to get rolling on that. We'd like to get rolling on the projects that are listed there, and we are gonna do our best to be able to use bond funds to pay for those things. And in the event that we can't use bond funds for these projects, we would have to use that other facilities assessment.
So that would come out of the 6.5, and it's there. And that's what this is for. And we could do the tennis and the swim and the Lake Belton all out of that 6.5 and still hold our 850 back for what you're saying?
Correct.
And then where's the 384 gonna come? We're still looking at what we
Still
can
looking
do.
at where we're
Okay.
thinking.
there's some bond rules that we have to consider and make sure we're in compliance.
What do you think, Al?
I think it's awesome.
That finishes up our list, that means we're good with most of them.
Everybody feels pretty good about stuff, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was worried about talking about this one time, and I talked a lot in the last couple of weeks. so.
Well, I obviously, dude, I'm all in on, I'm a huge proponent of the stakeholders that approve these bond funds need to be as comfortable as possible when they go to a home game. And when I walked in there and saw that, I said, they're gonna sit right next to the other people, and that's uncomfortable sometimes. And so I knew the first time I saw it, this has to be fixed, so I'm all in on this. Yeah, I wanna take care of those people that are taking care of us, and the stakeholders are the ones that are sitting in the bleachers, not in the fancy bullpens and the turf fields.
Yeah.
So I knew this was coming down the pipe.
So just to recap in this, at upcoming board meeting, we're gonna probably be bringing that swim center roof replacement and approval of that. We're gonna make sure that we get moving on the Belton High School tennis court expansion. We're going to be able to update you all on what pot of money we're paying the facilities assessment out of. We're gonna begin looking at that concrete and drainage work project and see what we have to do for that, but we'd like to move forward with that project. The baseball, softball expansion, we'd like to move forward with that project. And then there's one more on here, 30-year demographer build-out study. So I added that one, and I just wanna keep this in the back of your mind. Sam Listy was just here and told you all $3.5 million to get Loop 121 site ready. Getting a demographer build-out study, having Templeton come in and say, in 30 years, this is what we are projecting Belton ISD will look like. That would cost us some money, but what it would do, it would allow us to address something that you brought up earlier, and that's really look at real estate long-term rather than short-term. And I worry about that moving forward, so then we're gonna have to explore that pretty soon here in Belton ISD. Elementary school design process was the other thing that I brought up. I think that given the demographer report and the urgency of potentially building new elementary schools, we should probably see what we can do to get the design work for a new elementary floor plan taken care of. And that would include, so this might make you happy about what the facilities committee could do, us probably doing some site visits to some elementary schools, really seeing what an 800 student elementary school might look like in different districts, and starting to get a design process together, working with some architects, et cetera. So that could be another big use of that money that we have in the bond funds as well. Obviously, Jennifer Land isn't here today, and we rely on Jennifer and our bond counsel to give us the right direction on what we can use the fund for. So she'll be guiding us through any of those things. But that's what we're bringing to you tonight for moving forward.
All right.
That's great.
Great.
And we should have, just for future, we should have a facilities assessment update probably by next meeting. And then I think we'll have our, the mapping project we told you all about months ago. I think we should have some maps to show you guys that digital mapping of the campuses and stuff. Be able to show you some products on that. So
There's one other question, and this isn't long, but how do we look back on the west side of the football stadium with our maintenance? We've got some things kind of working in the works with that too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll take care of those guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember hearing that.
You know, and I think Mike mentioned this, but I should mention this real quickly. That facilities assessment study, we have CTE needs at Belton High School. Because we know that, we're relying on some of the information coming back from that study to help us decide how to move forward on that. But that is gonna be another piece of the project that we're gonna be coming to y'all.
I remember we had a report, might have been maybe the first or second facilities meeting we had. I thought CTE came and talked to us about some.
Stephanie,
Oh, yeah.
Stephanie has come a couple of times,
We
yeah.
know that
There's some big
health
things.
sciences, some of the different things.
Correct.
Food
Well,
service.
the welding booths,
We know a lot.
ventilations, all that
Yes,
stuff,
so
yeah.
believe me,
It's all up there.
I'm laying there at 3 in the morning thinking about stuff. I'm thinking about CTE.
Okay.
I'm thinking about ag horns, I'm thinking about tennis courts, because to me, it's still about extracurricular is what keeps so many of our kids on the straight and narrow and engaged, and we can't be turning kids away, so I appreciate everybody. We good?
We have one more item real quick. I'd just like to ask you all to consider this. This is a request for me. Connie's handing it out. Sorry, I thought she was projecting. When we scheduled the meeting dates for the facility committee, starting with Robin and stuff, the facility committee meeting is actually 2 days after a regular board meeting.
Yes.
It kind of hurts us sometimes because it's hard to actually get into a right cadence for having facility committee meetings and then taking something to the board. And it also puts us meeting multiple times in 1 week, which I know y'all love, but what we would propose is that after January here is we move our facility committee meeting dates so that they are actually the week before our regular board meeting.
Works for me.
All right, man.
So you see those adjusted dates there.
That's perfect.
Is that
It makes
okay?
those reports awful hard when it's been 30 days since we've had a meeting to tell you all. Because it's really time for the next one to happen, so this is awesome.
Great. Well, we'll go ahead and we'll make those changes and we'll let the whole board know there in December as well and move forward from there.
All right, wow. We went long today, so it's, what, 5:33? We adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank
y'all.
everybody for your hard work.